This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're highlighting the ongoing effort to increase access to pre-kindergarten classes for kids all over New York, as the current landscape is riddled with a patchwork system of availability. To discuss the campaign to boost access, including what is being proposed by Governor Kathy Hochul, we're joined remotely by Shannon Mullin, a senior policy analyst with the Children's Agenda. Well, for starters, when we talk about pre-K for 4-year-olds, is that just a fancy name for the preschool that I went to at the YMCA in the early 90s? I mean, what actually qualifies as pre-kindergarten classes for the purposes of this conversation?
Pre-K can look like a lot of different things. It's offered both in school district buildings and in our community-based organizations. It does have a curriculum and a bunch of different curriculums that teachers can follow, and it's really focused on getting our earliest learners ready for that kindergarten classroom and everything that comes with that. It's social emotional learning, it's learning what it's like to have a schedule, it's learning your basic colors and weather and all those little things that help get you ready to be in that more formal school setting that you'll be in for the next several years.
So does it have to be in a classroom setting, or can pre-K be in a person's home or some sort of other community setting?
It definitely can be offered by family-based childcare, group family childcare settings, which is a really nice part of the program. Families have a choice of the setting that works best for their child. Maybe a student isn't ready to be in a very large center classroom yet, and they need a couple more months or years of that structure before they're ready to move on to that. Or maybe a family needs wraparound services and before and after school care, and they can get all of that with the same provider in a home setting, which is really nice.
Well, in terms of availability, we hear a lot about New York City putting its shoulders into the idea of universal access to pre-K. So what does the picture look like outside of the Big Apple in terms of availability? And are there any other sort of trends that you've noticed when assessing the landscape outside of the five boroughs?
This program has been around since the 90s, and there definitely were districts upstate that were early adopters, particularly the Big Five. I'm based in Rochester, and we've had the program since the late 90s. New York State set a goal in 2013 of providing full-day pre-K to all 4-year-olds, and 13 years later, we're still not there. It's about half of 4-year-olds outside of New York City that still don't have access, and that number is much higher for our 3-year-olds if we want to get into that. But it's slowly but surely growing, but the funding issues and just the structural flaws with how New York State has operated universal pre-K in the past have made it a much slower rollout than I think anybody was hoping for.
Well, yeah, let's get into that rollout, because in a report that you worked on that came out in 2025, you found that the state's existing effort to fund pre-kindergarten classes is complicated to administer, has structural flaws, and is not enough per student. I imagine the last point is kind of self-explanatory, but what is the issue with the administration, and what are some of the structural flaws that may have slowed or limited the rollout?
This grant program has been a really great attempt to try and get resources to districts for these earliest learners. But like you said, there are structural flaws for the early adopter districts like Rochester and the other Big Five who started their programs early. And really for any district that's opting into this program, what happens is when they initially opt in, they get a target number of pupils to enroll, and then they also get a set amount of money that they're going to get for those pupils, which you can do some math and get a per pupil amount. And that per pupil funding is either half of a district's foundation amount, which is the amount they get for K-12 students, or $5,400, which is the minimum. That number can then be adjusted based on a number of different elements of community need or things like that. So the issue comes in when a district has already done all their expanding. Each year, their amount will go up a little bit as foundation aid goes up a little bit. But if a district is already serving all of the students that are available in their community because they've had a program for a while, they eventually get to a point where they're flat funded because they're no longer adding new students, they're no longer adding new classrooms, and that's really been the only way that districts can expand their UPK funding. And then on the flip side of that, that minimum per pupil funding amount really is just too low to be sustainable for those wealthier districts. They certainly could be contributing more locally sometimes, but 5,400 is really just not enough to support a full year of programming per pupil.
Well, you mentioned that idea of the local contribution. Are we seeing that the districts where they have either the higher rates of participation or maybe universal participation in pre-K, that it's a result of local buy-in and the school districts ponying up additional resources, or is there some other reason why we see some districts having, say, higher uptake than others?
Really varies district by district. There are certainly wealthier districts who have put in money and have been able to grow their programs. For the Big Five, they unfortunately don't have much power to raise additional local funding, so they've struggled with, as they reach flat funding, just rising costs and inflation are eating away at the amount that they get, which unfortunately is limiting the continued high quality or any potential expansions that they might be looking to do. But yeah, it really varies by district.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you. For listeners just joining us, this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Shannon Mullin, a senior policy analyst with the Children's Agenda. So earlier this year, in order to achieve universal pre-K access by the 28-29 school year, the governor has proposed funding more seats and increasing funding, bringing it up to the greater of $10,000 or the applicable district's foundation aid per pupil, which would come with a price tag of about $500 million. How far do you think this commitment goes? Because it addresses what you were talking about in terms of that per pupil funding number of about $5,400. And do you think this is the best way to go about using the state dollars to boost access to pre-K?
We are really excited to see this increase. This is something we and our partners have been advocating for years. And so, yeah, we think it's going to go quite a distance to helping New York reach universal status. With this money, we're hoping to add about 40,000 new four-year-old seats, which is going to be incredibly transformative for those students and those districts.
Well, how does 40,000 compare to the need that is out there? Is that going to solve the problem, or are we talking about only serving a portion of the students that are waiting for access?
That is a great question. I don't have that number in front of me, unfortunately, but can definitely get back to you with that. But it's going to make a huge difference. One thing we are hoping that the legislature can add to this proposal is our 3-year-olds. There are 3-year-olds outside of New York City in about 73 districts who are already getting classes, and there's no proposal at all in the executive budget that would raise the funding that districts get for those students. So in order to reach a truly universal system, we do also want to see those 3-year-olds included. But yeah, we're celebrating this win and always looking to do more.
So the governor's commitment is one that envisions universal pre-K access by the 28-29 school year. So this is still, a couple years away. Is that time horizon one that makes sense to you, or is this something where we should be able to achieve this earlier?
I think it's reasonable. These higher rates will start next year in the 26-27 school year, so districts will be able to reap those benefits and hopefully continue to expand. For the districts who don't currently offer pre-K at all, I think having a rollout over a couple years makes sense to allow them to find space and hire qualified staff and get all of the materials they need. So we would always love this to happen tomorrow, but giving districts a couple years to build up to this, I think makes sense.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the infrastructure side of things. You need space and you also need personnel. Which do you think is going to be a bigger challenge moving forward?
It's tough, and I do think it's going to vary by district, of course. UPK is a really wonderful system in that it's a mixed delivery system, like we talked about earlier. So districts currently have to set aside at least 10% of their funding to partner with community-based organizations. So that's definitely a way that can help them solve their space issues. There's a workforce shortage in childcare and education across the board. So, of course, finding qualified teachers is going to be tricky, but hopefully with these higher per pupil rates, they'll be able to up the amount that these really qualified and really skilled teachers will be earning in a way that allows them to re-enter the field if they've had to leave or stay in the field longer. So we're optimistic.
Well, finally, are there any reasons to be concerned about spending so much on these community-based organizations? I think people might have more confidence in the traditional school settings, given that this is what they do for that K through 12 population. So, do we have, say, enough checks and balances to ensure that there is a high quality pre-K experience at these community-based organizations?
Yeah, I would say so. These programs really are a partnership between CBOs and the district. There is oversight and constant partnership. I know here in Rochester, we have a monthly meeting between CBO leaders and the district just to share ideas and troubleshoot issues. So it really is a partnership. I don't think people need to be concerned. And if that is the setting that works better for families, we should absolutely be supporting that and supporting the educators who choose to work at CBOs.
Well, we've been speaking with Shannon Mullin, their senior policy analyst with the Children's Agenda, and you can find her report, Reimagining Universal Pre-Kindergarten Funding in New York, at thechildrensagenda.org. Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.